The United Kingdom thought it was building the future of aviation. Actually, no. A passenger plane so advanced, so precisely engineered, that the rest of the world would have no choice but to follow suit. Instead, it became one of the most costly mistakes in the history of modern aviation.
Over $12 billion. 2 decades of development. The weight of British national pride, staked on a single aircraft. And the strangest thing? The plane actually worked. It worked perfectly. So why did almost no one buy it? Because the real reason for this plane's failure had practically nothing to do with the plane itself.
To understand why Britain spent $12 billion on a jet the market couldn't absorb, you have to go back further than most people realize. Because in the 1950s and 60s, Britain wasn't just building airplanes, it was building proof. The de Havilland Comet, the world's first commercial jet airliner, British first. The Vickers VC-10, elegant, powerful, adored by passengers across 3 continents, British. Concorde, the most iconic passenger aircraft ever to carry a fare-paying passenger. An Anglo-French partnership, yes, but unmistakably British in ambition. For a generation, Britain sat at the table with Boeing and Douglas as equals, not aspirants, equals. But by the late 1970s, something had quietly changed. The Boeing 737 was selling in such volumes that it resembled a conquest rather than commerce. Airbus, a Franco-German consortium that the British aviation industry initially rejected, methodically captured the medium-range market. And British Aerospace, a recently nationalized manufacturer carrying the legacy of everything that came before it, faced a gap. Short-haul regional routes, city airports, noise restrictions, densely populated urban areas, short runways. The aircraft serving these routes, aging turboprops, outdated regional jets, were noisy, slow, and becoming increasingly unacceptable to the urban planners managing the airports they flew into. And British Aerospace saw an opportunity in this. If someone built a clean, quiet, purpose-built 4-engine jet for regional city routes, it could capture an entirely new segment of commercial aviation. So, they dusted off a project that had originally been launched by Hawker Siddeley in the late 1960s. They returned to it, they rededicated themselves to it, and they decided to bring it to life. They called it the BAE 146. And for a moment, just a moment, everything seemed possible. If you like aviation stories that go much deeper than the headlines, subscribe, because this story gets a lot more complicated. When the BAE 146 made its first flight in September 1981, the aviation world really took notice, and it was easy to see why. 4 turbofan engines, a high-mounted wing, a compact fuselage short enough to fly from regional airports that a 737 or DC-9 could never physically reach. But the feature the engineers were genuinely proud of, the one that made airlines take notice, was the noise level. At a time when airports across Europe and North America were tightening noise restrictions, when residents living near city airports were banding together, protesting, and filing lawsuits, the BAE 146 was almost eerily quiet. It earned a nickname almost immediately: the Whispering Jet. London City Airport. A runway carved out of docklands, surrounded by buildings, with such a steep final approach that first-time passengers cling to their armrests, was essentially built on the assumption that the BAE 146 existed. That plane could fly there, to Bern, to Florence, to Washington National Airport, with its flight time restrictions and noise control equipment aimed at every plane on final approach. Airlines operating out of city airports with noise restrictions didn't just want the BAE 146. In many cases, they actually needed it. So British Aerospace had the right idea at the right time. 4 engines, low noise levels, good performance on short runways. The world should have rushed to buy it. Instead, almost immediately, something went wrong. And the problem wasn't with the engineering. The BAE 146 was indeed redesigned precisely in the areas that were supposed to be its strengths. 4 Avco Lycoming ALF 502 turbofan engines, American-made, which was already a somewhat awkward choice for a British national aviation program, but they were the best option available given the specific noise and power requirements. The aircraft could carry between 70 and 100 passengers depending on the configuration. Its range was approximately 1,800 miles, more than enough for European regional flights. Its takeoff performance was outstanding. The aircraft took off in less than 1,500 meters, and it flew beautifully. Pilots who flew the 146 genuinely loved it. Passengers found it smooth, comfortable, and impressively quiet. Flight attendants appreciated the spacious cabin for an aircraft of that size. British Aerospace delivered the first aircraft to Dan Air in 1983. Next came Pacific Southwest Airlines in California. Then, a whole host of European regional carriers. On paper, the orders were coming in. By the mid-1980s, more than 200 firm orders had been placed. The extended version, the BAE 146-300, had a longer fuselage, allowing it to carry up to 128 passengers. A cargo version, a version for corporate flights, military transport variant. British Aerospace was expanding the family. It was investing in the future. It was risking more and more. But the airline's accountants were doing their own calculations. And what they discovered didn't match what the British Aerospace sales team had been telling them. Because the BAE 146 had a secret that British Aerospace had known since the very beginning of the program. A secret that the aircraft's physical design made virtually unsolvable. And it was directly related to those 4 engines. That is the main problem with the BAE 146. And once you understand this, you won't be able to miss it. 4 engines on a regional aircraft, carrying 70 to 100 passengers. Let's think about this for a moment. Most regional aircraft of that era, the Fokker 100, the McDonnell Douglas MD-80, and later the Bombardier CRJ, were twin-engine. 2 engines requiring maintenance, 2 fuel bills, everything in pairs. The BAE 146 had 4. Now, British Aerospace had its reasons, genuine engineering reasons. 4 smaller engines produced less noise than 2 large ones. 4 engines provided redundancy during steep approaches at congested city airports. The high-wing design required a specific engine placement geometry. The logic was sound, but the economics were brutal. With every scheduled maintenance cycle, airlines had to service 4 engines instead of 2. Every engine overhaul, which on the Avco Lycoming ALF 502 occurred with inconvenient frequency, cost 4 times as much as on a twin-engine counterpart. Fuel consumption per seat was significantly higher than that of twin-engine aircraft with comparable passenger capacity. And this is where things get really painful. The airlines buying regional aircraft weren't major national carriers. They weren't Lufthansa or British Airways with huge engineering departments and well-developed maintenance infrastructure. They were small, regional operators. Companies operating with minimal profitability on unpopular routes. Companies for whom an unexpected bill for an engine overhaul was more than just an inconvenience. It was a threat to their very existence. British Aerospace built the Rolls-Royce of regional aircraft. Elegant, powerful, sophisticated, and then it tried to sell it to operators who needed a workhorse. But even that isn't the whole story, because there was a deeper problem, a problem whose roots lay not in the aircraft, but in the policy that created it. Leave a comment below. Do you think having 4 engines on a regional jet was an engineering mistake or a brilliant idea that just couldn't survive in today's economic climate? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Let's talk about what really matters to airlines. Not range, not noise certification, not how the plane looks on the tarmac. Cost per passenger mile. The cost, in dollars or pounds, of transporting 1 passenger for 1 mile. It's the most important metric in commercial aviation, and it's absolutely ruthless. In the mid-1980s, the Boeing 737-300, which entered service in 1984, delivered a passenger mile cost that airlines found virtually impossible to beat. 2 CFM56 engines, quiet enough for most major airports, extremely reliable. A maintenance infrastructure spanning every continent. The BAE 146, which carried fewer passengers on 4 engines, simply couldn't compete on that metric outside of the very specific niche for which it was designed. And that meant that for most airlines, even those that initially showed genuine interest, the economic viability evaporated the moment they made honest projections. The airlines that could justify choosing the 146 were truly specialized operators. Airlines flying to city airports with noise restrictions, airlines operating in high-altitude, thin-air environments. The 146's 4-engine configuration actually improved performance in places like Denver and Bogota. Airlines serving routes that no other aircraft could physically reach. But it was a small market, brutal, forever small. British Aerospace created the perfect solution for a limited problem, and it funded its development as if the problem were universal. Meanwhile, the British government was keeping an eye on the order book, and they were unhappy. The BAE 146 was never just an airplane. It was a statement. When the British government nationalized British Aerospace in 1977, the underlying promise was simple. Government investment in aviation technology would generate revenue, jobs, exports, national prestige, proof that Britain was still at the forefront of the industry. The BAE 146 was the prime example of that promise. Only that promise never materialized. Throughout the 1980s, British Aerospace received substantial government support, direct subsidies, startup assistance, and preferential financing for customers. The total costs of developing, subsidizing, and maintaining the program rose to figures that, according to a later comprehensive analysis, exceeded $12 billion in today's prices. For context, this figure is comparable to the development cost of some wide-body aircraft. For a regional aircraft, with a capacity of 70 to 100 passengers. When British Aerospace was reprivatized in 1981, the 146 program was transferred to it as both an asset and a liability. The new private company now had to make the aircraft commercially viable, without the safety net of unlimited government support. And the order book told a sad story. Yes, in the end, 221 BAE 146 aircraft were delivered. Yes, the aircraft flew for operators on 5 continents. But the program never reached the sales volume needed to recoup development costs. The break-even point, the number of aircraft that needed to be sold for the investment to pay off, was never reached. It didn't even come close. And then came the moment that decided everything. In 1992, British Aerospace restructured the BAE 146 program under a new brand. They called it the Avro RJ series. New avionics, upgraded engines, the Textron Lycoming LF507, slightly more efficient, a refreshed cabin interior, a sincere attempt to modernize the aircraft and make it profitable. And for a few years, it seemed that might be enough. Swiss, the successor to Swiss Air, actively operated the Avro RJ. Lufthansa CityLine, the Hungarian airline Malev, carefully selected European regional carriers that valued exactly what this aircraft was capable of. The aircraft had real operators, real loyalty, a real purpose. But the trajectory was already obvious to anyone willing to look at the situation honestly. Because while British Aerospace was relaunching a 1980s-era aircraft under a new name, the rest of the industry was moving in a completely different direction. Bombardier was developing the CRJ series, a twin-engine, 50-seat regional jet that would redefine the economics of short-haul flights. Embraer was creating the ERJ family. Both were specifically designed with the economic requirements of modern airlines in mind. Both with 2 engines. The window of opportunity that had existed for the BAE 146, a window in which its specific capabilities could justify its specific costs, was closing. And British Aerospace understood this. By the late 1990s, new orders had dwindled to a trickle. The last Avro RJ was delivered in 2003, 20 years after the first BAE 146 entered service. A total of 221 aircraft were produced, in a market where Boeing had delivered over 1,100 aircraft of the 737 Classic series alone. The program was shut down, and the UK was left with debts.